the first time I shadowed, the very first time I shadowed in August, I didn't know how to do anything. I had never spoken to a patient. I was with the doctor and he said, "All right, go interview these three patients." And I was like, I don't know what questions to ask, but I'll give it a shot.
I feel like I just went to church. I feel so motivated talking to you. You have a gift. You really do. Hello, and welcome to the Med School Years podcast. I'm Dina.
And I'm Carlos, where we talk about everything you need to know about the medical school journey and residency.
We've both worked closely with applicants, advisors, and schools to understand the ins and outs of what it takes to get into med school. And now we're going beyond the admissions process.
And don't worry, this podcast isn't just about the boring stuff. We're also going to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the life of medical school students and residents.
We know that medical school can be overwhelming, but we're here to break it all down for you with expert tips, insider advice, and stories from people and students who've been there.
So whether you're starting the exploration process or just curious about what it takes to becoming a future physician, we got you covered.
Sit back, relax, and welcome to the Med School Years podcast. Hi, I'm Dina, and welcome to the Med School Years podcast. I am here with Carlos, and our special guest today is RJ, who is completing his 1 year at Ohio State. So we're super excited to have him here today and to hear a little bit about what life is like in medical school and if it is exactly what he thought it would be. So welcome, and thank you for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. So my first question, RJ, is you entered Ohio State after graduating from Notre Dame, which was a Catholic institution and a lot smaller than a huge powerhouse state school like Ohio State, right? We're talking like you probably could fit all of Notre Dame in like one little tiny piece of Ohio State's campus. And the med school is on the campus. So tell me how that shift has been for you and what it's been like to be in a med school that is intricately like intertwined with an undergrad campus.
Absolutely. It was definitely a shock at first. Like you mentioned, Notre Dame is pretty small. We didn't really have any roads going through campus, and I showed up to Columbus. I'm like, I live near a parking garage near one of the main roads, and there's all this noise. So it definitely took some time to adjust to living in a bigger city. But like you mentioned, the medical school is well integrated into the undergrad campus. It's really close to the Wexner Medical Center and all these other major hospitals in Ohio. I think it's been a pretty good adjustment. You see undergrads in our main buildings, like our main medical school buildings, but primarily the medical students kind of stick to themselves, I guess. But they're very well integrated with us.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to sort of maybe ask you, you went through this journey of applying to medical schools and your goal is to become a physician. Is it everything that you thought it was going to be? Or what has been the biggest shock for you transitioning to this area of medicine?
That's a great question. I think there's a few angles to that. I think the academics are certainly a piece. Everybody says it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose. And I definitely found that to be true at certain points during the curriculum. January, we had our cardiology block, which was a lot of content in a very short amount of time. But I think coming from Notre Dame and especially having just graduated, I didn't take a gap year. I was kind of still in that school mode. So I felt like I was able to handle that challenge of a little bit more content. And I think another aspect too is the people. I was kind of worried that it might be a little bit intense. You hear horror stories of gunners and people working really hard. But I found that to be completely the opposite. The people here are phenomenal, feel so supported. Even from day one, they really did a good job of making sure that we had chances to meet people and that we could meet our professors and feel supported by them. So I think to answer your original question, it is absolutely everything I thought it to be. The doctors and the mentors that I've met have been phenomenal in guiding my development as a healthcare provider and really opening my eyes to what specialty I want to go into in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned something important, that you entered med school right out of college, which we talk about this all the time. It is really difficult to get accepted to med school, period. But to get accepted to medical school right out of college, I think it's even more difficult, because you're applying at a time where you only have like 3 years under your belt of experiences. What would you say the makeup of your classmates are like? Are there a lot of non-traditional students, older students with families, and what has that transition been like for you, coming from like being a senior at Notre Dame with football games and like just such a fun, supportive environment, and then being around students who maybe are a little.
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely on the younger side. I just turned 23 a little bit ago, and there's people here who are 33, people who have had a career shift. One of my good friends spent a number of years in Los Angeles working in the politics scene in Los Angeles before coming to medical school. I think what that does is it just creates a class environment where you learn so much about other people's experiences and their lives. I think that has been a huge part of, my development as well. Instead of just going through school, these people have had some great experiences. And I think learning from them has been great. And although we do have a bigger class size at 224, and sometimes I still see people that I may not know, I haven't met yet. I'm always meeting new people. And I think Ohio State did a great job of creating a class that really blends together well and all supports each other.
Yeah, it's eye-opening because having worked right in medical education and seeing the transition of like students come from the undergrad world, or folks that have been working, doing politics, working for nonprofits, all of that coming together, it really creates a unique experience for everybody because you get to learn from your peers. But I want to talk a little bit about what you brought to the classroom. I've read a little bit about sort of your experiences that you did as an undergrad preparing you for medicine. What do you think was maybe that one thing that was different about you, or that you could present yourself as like, this is what I bring to the classroom, not having worked in politics like some of your classmates? Maybe Ohio State said like, yeah, we want to take that opportunity on you because you bring that uniqueness. Talk about those experiences.
Yeah, I think there's probably two main experiences. Number one, I had a pretty good host of leadership opportunities while at Notre Dame. I was on the board of directors for a national nonprofit, as well as I led community service organization for underserved kids in South Bend, where Notre Dame is located. I also was a camp counselor at a camp for type 1 diabetics for 2 summers. And in my second summer, I was in a leadership role. So I think all those leadership experiences definitely made me, maybe a standout applicant. It's hard to tell because I wasn't on the other side, but I think it was a strong point in my application. And I think another aspect was some of the academic diversity I had. I had 2 minors, history and Latino studies. And both of those came up in pretty much every interview because it's a very interesting combination to have.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
How did you decide on those minors? Because we work with a lot of undergrads who ask all the time, like, will it be an advantage for me to add like a global health minor or a public health minor, right? And we always say, like, do it for you. Don't do it for admissions, because I feel like a minor is only as good as what you do with it and how you use it. So how do you feel like those 2 minors helped shape your journey and added to your academic enrichment?
It's a great question. The history minor really came about because I've always been interested in history, always loved taking history courses in middle school and high school. And I knew there was a great history department at Notre Dame, and I didn't want to declare a second major and take a little bit more heavy coursework. And I thought a minor would be a great fit to kind of explore that passion outside of medical training, because I figured once I got into medical school, I'd be doing science for 30, 40 years. I wanted a few years where I could really explore those passions outside of science. And history was great for that. And Latino studies really came about because, at Notre Dame, it's an interesting story. At Notre Dame, you get randomly placed into a dorm. You have no say at all. And I just happened to get placed into a dorm where all of people around me spoke Spanish. And a lot of them came from countries outside of the United States. And just experiencing, talking with them and getting to learn more about them really and their experiences made me interested in Latino studies and pursuing more formal coursework in it. And it turned out to be a huge point in my application. I got a letter from the undergraduate director of Latino studies at Notre Dame And I think it was just a great experience for me to grow as a person.
Yeah, it's a unique path definitely to medicine, and thank you for sharing that. I'm curious to know how you sort of in your mind put all these things together, right? Like the history piece of your interests, the Latino studies, because of the connections that you made while in undergrad, right? You were just placed in this environment and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then this passion and interest for medicine. Like, how did you manage to blend all those things together, knowing that you still had a goal to get into medical school? And you had to do all of this other stuff, right? All of these science things, all of the clinical stuff. Can you talk a little bit about your balance of all of that and how it prepared you for sort of medical school?
Absolutely. I think medicine's a super unique field in that combines science with the humanities to serve the patient. And I think that the history and the Latino studies, learning to read, learning about people's stories and their lived experiences, that's really what medicine is all about. And I think you can take all the science you want, but I think medical school trains you to be a physician. And that's somebody who really applies science in a very caring way. And I think, in particular, with Latino studies, as the Latino population continues to increase in the United States, I knew a lot of my patients in the future would benefit from somebody who was a little bit more culturally competent. I speak decent Spanish and I'm still improving. Somebody who could go that extra mile in providing very competent patient care and having my patients feel at ease, knowing that I've tried to understand their culture and meet them where they're at.
Thank you. It's awesome.
RJ, I want to ask some questions about your application process. You were super organized. And we say all the time, one of the key things to making a really stressful process less stressful is to start early and to really be organized. And that can look different for everybody. Can you share some of the ways that you stayed organized throughout the application process?
Yes, absolutely. I wrote some down because I figured this.
Because you're organized.
I was a really big user of like Google Drive, having everything on there. In terms of my primary application, I made a folder of my drafts as well as my works and activities. And I would highly advise anybody who's applying this cycle or in their future to be in a position where they copy and paste it. I didn't want to type anything in the AMCAS, if that makes sense. I wanted everything to be very polished and refined by the time I entered it into AMCAS. In terms of the secondaries, I made again, on Google Drive or whatever you may use, I had a folder for each school. So Ohio State had a folder and, Georgetown had a folder and so on, where I had all the secondaries for that school, as well as any information that I had. In my case, I mentioned how I was at the camp for type 1 diabetics. I only had an hour to write each day. I would work for about 20 hours and then write for an hour and then get some rest before the next day. So I had to be super organized in this process. I think what really my magnum opus, the best thing that I did, was I made a spreadsheet for tracking the progress of my secondaries. I had all the medical schools that I applied to, and then kind of across the top, I had the draft I was on, the date that I had to submit, and then the username and password for the portal. Because as you're going through the summer, there's going to be so many emails and different dates that you have to keep aware of. So having a central place where you can focus on this is what I need to do and this is the date I need to do it by. Kind of like you said, a lot of people are very daunted by the process because they don't maybe know where to start. I think this was a method that I used to give myself a little bit more structure so that I could point out a little bit more concrete things and be like, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z by July 1st.
It's clear that your organization helped you be successful in this process, right? Because it is chaotic and it can be chaotic if you don't have structure. Now you've gotten into medical school. Are you carrying that organization with you through medical school and staying
Great
organized, staying on
question.
top of things? Just because I imagine that your day is in and out, right? Of like,
Mhm.
I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So have you carried some of those tools, right, into your now medical school?
It's funny you ask because we just finished up our last final this past Thursday, and
Congrats.
thank you. Yeah, M1 year is over, which is kind of crazy to believe. But this on Saturday and Sunday, I spent 2 days making a plan for the summer in a Google Sheet document, trying to coming up with goals for the summer. What do I want to accomplish with research? How do I want to approach step one? What specialties do I want to shadow? And who do I want to shadow? Have I contacted them? So just being very organized. Again, I think in medical school where you are pressed for time, being able to take 45 minutes on a Sunday and say, what does my week look like? For me, I use Google Calendar a lot. So I can kind of see what I need to get done, what events I might have throughout the day. I think that's been a big piece of my success in medical school as well, certainly.
Part of your organization in your planning was conducting mock interviews, right? And practicing a lot. I had the pleasure of doing a few of those mock interviews with you. And you're really strong in your interviews. You practiced a lot. You really took it seriously. Even practicing at home with your with your dad, who is definitely a huge supporter of you. Let's talk a little bit about how those interviews went, because you had multiple interviews. And to me, I think you killed it. After each interview, you would come back and you would say, like, was it? Like, I did a great job. Like, I was totally prepared for the questions. What are some tips that you have to prepare for interviews?
Yeah, my process was basically what I would do before an interview. I would do what I called a deep dive of the school. I would spend 45 minutes to an hour really learning the school. What are some clubs that I could see myself being a part of? What are unique aspects of the curriculum? What are service opportunities like a free clinic? Because when I was in these interviews, I wanted the students to see me as somebody they could go to school with, that knew their school well. It was more of a conversation between colleagues than it was me, interviewing for them. So that was kind of step one, is doing a deep dive of whatever school I had. And then step two was kind of writing down a list of interview questions and going on. I know Student Doctor Network usually has a list. I was told to take those with a grain of salt and kind of see which ones come up again and again and maybe focus on those. And then just writing down some bullet point answers for those. And then, like you mentioned, then comes the practice. So I did a couple practice interviews, I think 3 or 4 with you in the fall to prepare, and those were great. And then with my dad, I would do 2 to 3 Zoom interviews before each real interview. So I did take it pretty seriously because it's very different. You're looking in the little green dot for an hour, talking about your application in a way that promotes yourself and what you've done, but also doesn't sound arrogant. So it definitely took a little bit of time, but I think as I went on, I was able to integrate the research that I did from the schools into my answers. And that's why I think my interviews were very strong.
I mean, practice makes perfect. And I think your dedication, right? Again, this is a hope and a dream and a goal of yours to get into medicine. So you're going to invest the time. And I've had conversations with pre-health students that are like, if you think if I do this and if I do that, is this possible? I'm like, anything is possible as long as you dedicate the time and put the effort and follow your timeline, your goals, right? I'm keeping on top of things. And I can't predict what's going to happen in the future, but I'm sure that you can predict if you stick closely to what you're trying to do, right? Those goals and following that tight line of goals and things that you want to do. So you talked about research that you were doing right before going to medical school. Have you continued that research in medical school, and what has that sort of transition been like, or what is it? What has it evolved to? Is it more? Is it less?
Yeah, so I did 2 years of what we call bench research or basic science. So I was in a cancer lab at Notre Dame, primarily just dissecting mice and running some lab tests on them. And in medical school, a lot of people would do what's called clinical research. So going through patient charts, kind of gathering information on outcomes, a little bit less so about basic sciences. If you're interested in MD, PhD, that might be more, your pathway. But this summer, I'll be doing clinical research in orthopedics, just trying, looking at outcomes of, certain injuries. And I think research here, especially at Ohio State, is very easy to come upon. I remember I went into shadow surgeon and I walked out with him offering me, oh, you could join this research team. I could put you on this project.
Great.
And I think in medical school, once you get that medical school email added to your profile, the doctors here or wherever you may be see that as a sign that you're capable. You're not just maybe an undergrad who may not have all the lab skills yet, and they'll definitely give you the research opportunities that you're looking for.
You're the second student we've interviewed who has emphasized that, when they got to med school, they have access to, the email addresses of all these doctors and faculty, and just reaching out and networking has just been huge to gain experiences. So thank you for sharing that. Was it a hard decision for you to make to choose Ohio State? You're from Ohio, right? So home state school, but you had a lot of great options. You were fortunate, right, to have options in the end. Was it a difficult decision to make in the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely took me a little bit of time to really think about, the future, right? Because I kind of grew up in the Midwest my whole life, had some options, very fortunately, outside of the Midwest at other institutions that were very high performing. But really, it kind of came down to a few things for me. One was kind of the personal touch to that Ohio State offered. I grew up coming to swim meets here, and my sister went here for undergrad, so I had this personal experience of going up to Columbus for game days kind of throughout my whole life. And I knew the campus well. And so that was a huge piece of it. Another piece was it's very strong academically. I looked through the match lists that are published each year where fourth year medical students matching into residency will go. And especially in the surgical fields, Ohio State was very strong. And I knew that if there was a precedent for matching fourth year medical students in the top programs, I'd love to be part of that. And also coming to the second look weekend, kind of seeing the campus, seeing the people here and meeting who else was likely going to come here really sealed the deal for me. And I'm so happy to come here. Like when you go into medical school and everybody's, centered around that same goal, you can kind of talk about what specialty you want to go into. And, everybody's a little nerdy and likes to study and stuff like that. And I found it's been the best year academically that I've had.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So you talked about being very academic driven. Of course, all medical students are. They have an end goal of transitioning into the next phase of their training, which is residency. But let's talk about the fun stuff. What are the fun things that you did, right, to sort of break up that idea that my whole life is now just academics and research? Like, tell us a little bit about your just student life experience at Ohio State.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing that I do is that I'm the student director of La Clinica Latina, which is the Spanish speaking free clinic here. Ohio State actually offers 4 free clinics. Lucky to be part of La Clinica Latina, kind of utilizing that Spanish and that Latino studies background, as well as some of the leadership experiences that I've had. It can be a lot of work, but it's very meaningful because even as a first year, I have the opportunity to really positively impact people's healthcare. And that's just a great feeling. It's why you come to medical school. And I think it reminds me, every time I go, it reminds me of why I'm here. And because
Mm.
sometimes you do get lost in the books and the research, and you're like, oh man, like, will it be worth it? And then you go and do the clinical setting, and the answer is absolutely it will be. So that's been a great experience. I also do some events for like the Alumni Association, helping out with reunion weekend, also trying to get involved with the admissions committee, which I think would be a very
Great.
strong fit. I really enjoyed my interview process. And I think it'd be awesome to help other people out with that too. And then also like interest groups, orthopedic surgery interest groups, other surgical interest groups that always have workshops going around, just trying to get medical students the hands-on experience and kind of break up the schoolwork a little bit. Kind of on the side, like I work out. Ohio State has great fitness facilities. I think in medical school, taking care of yourself physically is very important. If you're going to be studying for long periods of time, you got to shake it up every now and then. I also read a lot of Roman history, which I tell
I
people
love
that,
that.
and they can't
Yeah.
believe it because in medical school, you say you're super busy all the time. But I always tell people that if something's important to you, you'll find time. And for me,
Yeah.
that's reading at the end of every day.
That was actually going to be my next question. It's a great segue about the reading. Obviously, you're reading Roman history for fun. Not everyone does that. I read an article yesterday. It was interesting that said that a lot of elite colleges are finding that students are coming there from high school saying, I've never even read a book. I've never even read a full book. And that it's almost like an epidemic now. And we see it a lot, I think, in terms of writing. Because when you read a lot, your writing gets better, right?
Mhm.
It's just common sense, and I think it has a huge impact. Talk to me a little bit about reading and how you think that as a hobby that has helped you in terms of your writing. Because I think a lot of medical school applicants don't understand that it's not just the writing for the application, but when you get to medical school, there will be writing. You need to know how to write. Talk to me about that correlation.
Absolutely. I grew up always reading. It was something that I was always interested in. I remember there was a competition called Battle of the Books where they give you a big list of books to read and you have to.
Would have loved that.
Yeah, and I remember I was so determined to finish that list, and I think we like won our school's competition. So I grew up reading a lot, and I think at Notre Dame I definitely continued that, especially senior year when things kind of cooled off a little bit. I was reading for probably 1 to 2 hours a day my final spring semester. Primarily, history or like fantasy books, like the Game of Thrones type books. But I certainly think there's a strong correlation. My dentist once told me the readers are the leaders, which is something I've never forgotten. And I think, especially now in medical school, the more you can read, not only topics that you enjoy, but research papers, learning how authors and physicians and researchers present their ideas and how do they structure an abstract and how do they talk about their results and conclusion. I think the more you can read, it'll make you a better applicant and it'll make you a better physician.
The readers are the leaders.
It's the quote of the day.
That would have been my kind of competition, right? Is the battle of the books. I love to read. And I think that was a perfect answer. I think that a lot of students just don't realize how important it is. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I think they think in isolation, right? Like, this is my application. I'm doing it for this and then I'm done, instead of thinking in the long run, this is going to help me. So you've mentioned a couple times now, and let me know if I'm guessing right. You're interested in ortho, possibly? You drop hits here and there in different things that you've done. Where did that choice come from?
Yeah, great question. Orthopedics and my exposure to it was really what got me interested in medicine in the first place. I tore my labrum and I was playing water polo in gym class and I tore my labrum, and I was a really good swimmer at the time, very competitive swimmer, and kind of having my surgeon's influence to help me get back to that high level, and started to think about, wow, I kind of like science. I could see myself doing something for other people. So I entered medical school. I'm like, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon, just do joints, back home. But then as time has gone on, especially at Ohio State, where they have every specialty you could ever imagine, I've really gotten some great exposure in other fields as well. Just recently, I shadowed a couple times with a plastic surgeon, really enjoyed that work. I really enjoyed our cardiology block that we had. Hopefully this summer, I can shadow a little bit in that. Definitely like the idea though of using my hands to make a, difference and being able to see like, wow, like that was the tangible impact I had. So I think that's what attracts me to surgery.
So surgical subspecialties, not decided yet, although ortho is an option. What are you doing now to sort of prepare you to narrow down that decision? I know you said shadowing, you're doing a little bit of research, but really, where do you see yourself doing very mindful things, right, to prepare you in that selection, so you're not at the end of 2 years, 3.5 years being like, I don't know what to do because I didn't take the time to really explore all of these fields?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it kind of all started last summer. Sat down with the list of specialties and kind of said, is this something that even vaguely interests me, or do I have no interest in it? And then kind of over the course of the year, try to shadow in those fields. And it was all about, like the principles of like, I want to work hopefully with my hands. I want to work, in a field that's changing, a field that's dynamic. And I think surgery falls well within that. And I think when I go home in a couple weeks, I'll probably sit down and do the same thing. Having been able to shadow a lot over this first year, critically analyze, could I see myself doing this? Is there even a vague possibility or not? And I think this summer I had identified like 6 specialties that I really would like to shadow in. And
Name them. What are those 6?
Yeah,
Just curious.
Ophthalmology, it's ophthalmology, it's head and neck surgery, orthopedics, plastics, cardiology, and something else. But I got 5. I got 5 out of 6. I think just kind of getting that really hands-on exposure, being able to go into the OR or the clinic, I think has been really great in my discernment process.
Interesting. You could even combine like ocular plastic. I think there's something
Yeah.
like under like 500 in the country.
Mhm.
Ocular plastic surgeons, something really cool like that. What has been the biggest surprise for you about medical school? Something where you were like, I did not expect this, or I didn't think it would be like this.
It's 100% got to be the people. For a couple of reasons. I think one,
Really?
yeah, 100%. I came in, I was fresh out of Notre Dame, and then I meet all these people with multiple kids, people who lived multiple years abroad, all these people with such a diverse experience. And I think that is what has made medical school so fascinating, is that every time I have a conversation with somebody who maybe had a non-traditional path and I learn a little bit more about their story, it's just fascinating to hear all these different people. And I think it's been a huge part of just, every physician will be different in their background. I was once told that becoming a doctor is like climbing Mount Everest. There's a lot of routes to do it, but they're all different, but they'll all get you to the top. And I think that's exactly what I've been able to notice here. And I also think, building off that, just how supportive people are. People, especially at Ohio State, I really can't speak to other schools, genuinely care for each other. I think a huge piece of that is because we're a pass fail curriculum. So there's not necessarily incentive to withhold information. It's more about how can I support other people. In our group chat, people are always sending resources. And I think that has really made our group very collaborative. And I think because that's how I think medicine should be. And I think it's been a great experience to live that.
It's the people.
It's
Without
people.
the people, yeah, without the people, you wouldn't be able to find your community and find comfort, right? Being at Ohio State or being anywhere. So you've done clinical work, but what has that transition been like in medical school? Like, what's the difference of doing clinical work before medical school versus like now in medical school? Give us a little bit of that sense of and context, right? I think it's different for
Mhm.
sure, but help others maybe understand.
Yeah, I think a lot of the clinical work, just take shadowing, for example. When I was in college, my shadowing would kind of be me following the physician, kind of standing in the corner, trying not to upset, anything, just observing, a very passive role. But I remember the very first time I shadowed in August, I didn't know how to do anything. I had never spoken to a patient. I was with the doctor, and he said, "All right, go interview these three patients." And I was like, I don't know what questions to ask, but I'll give it a shot. And so I think what doctors and what everybody knows is that you're learning, especially at Ohio State with the teaching hospital. A lot of people really want to teach. That's why they're here. They'll definitely give you those opportunities to practice any clinical skills that we learn. And it's been great because now I feel confident if I wanted to do a cardiac exam on somebody because I've had those opportunities to practice. And I think that, when you're in college, the doctor may not know you, but now in medical school, you're a little bit more qualified. And I think that definitely allows you a little bit more freedom in the clinical sphere.
Thank you for providing that context.
Do you think that someday you would want to, be in academic medicine and teach? I mean, you're very motivational in so many different ways, like with, with your reading and your leadership quotes and everything. And I think you've really absorbed a lot of great information from all of these people in
Mhm.
your life, who you've been involved with. You walk away with lessons. You're the kind of student who walks away with lessons. Do you think someday that you want to pay that forward and speak at conferences or teach students?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's one thing to answer now, having just completed M1 versus maybe in a couple years. But I love the idea of staying in academics. Just being a mentor is one of my favorite roles. I've mentored a pretty good amount of people, like personal statement reading and MCAT stuff and preparing for interviews. Kind of like you said, paying it forward because I had a lot of great mentors. And I think what academics lends itself to is that education piece, is that ability to be exposed to the latest research and go to conferences and have a very positive influence, not only on my patients, but also on the next generation. I think that would be a really fun career opportunity.
I was looking at your CV and stuff like that, that Dina sent over. You have a lot of leadership and
You
sort of
do.
this intrinsic motivation to be a leader and teach and be a mentor. So, I mean, you could definitely carry that into your career as a physician, right? Letting students, pre-health students come shadow you once you're out, in the clinical realm, because we know that that's difficult for pre-health students to find nowadays. Not a lot of physicians are willing to host students that just want to observe and watch and learn. I want to get back to this organization because I think for you, I'm sure
It's
you're
so
already
marvelous.
planning what year 2, 3, and potentially 4 looks like, knowing that you now have the next stage of your journey, right? You are then applying for residency, and there's all these pieces that need to be completed. Can you just give us maybe an idea of where you're planning to put step 1, step 2, what other things you're doing to just prepare now for that residency application?
Yeah, great question. I think one piece is kind of the extracurriculars. So doing well in those, impacting the organizations that I'm part of, developing relationships with people that I work with there, forgetting about residency, just being able to say that I improved it would be a great, honor to have walk away from. I think
Mhm.
in terms of step one, great question. I think about it all the time because the game has shifted. Because step one used to be scored, and it used to be the major exam if you're trying to go into a competitive specialty, kind of the make or break, so to speak. But now that it is pass fail, I think it places a little bit more incentive on learning clinical skills so that you can really do well in your third year rotations. I think it places a premium on developing relationships, so you can get a really strong letter, and not necessarily like letting your course work and your grades slide. But if you are pass fail on step one, and we're pass fail at Ohio State, I think it kind of has driven a lot of students to shadow a lot, get those research experiences and clinical experiences. But I'll probably, do some step one studying over the summer. Hopefully, I can take it earlier, probably around next March, so I can go to Florida or somewhere warm for a little bit before third year rotations because it's cold and rainy, and I think a nice little sunny vacation would be nice.
Come to Florida.
For step two, I'll probably take that May or June, my M3 going into M4 year. And then depending on what specialty that I end up applying into, doing my away rotations over that later summer and into early fall before applying in October.
Do you want to stay in the Midwest, or are you considering
Yeah,
going
that's a great
away?
question. I think it kind of depends on specialty as well. Given orthopedics is very competitive as well as
Mhm.
plastic surgery. If I stayed at Ohio State, I think it'd be great. I mean, I've been able to see the outcomes for the residents in all fields, and everybody who comes here will get to where they want to go. So I think that would be great. It could be fun to break out, maybe go someplace, south. I have some family in the Southeast, so maybe going a little bit closer to them. But I think at this point, my goal is like, let's find a specialty that I really like and then kind of say, what are the top programs that would be a good fit for my goals?
I think some students forget that it's not just about finding that specialty, but also personal goals, because this is going to be your career, and it's going to, I would say, intersect with your personal life and your personal goals, right? Building a family, not building a family, living by the ocean, not living by the ocean, living in a warm climate, not living in a warm climate. I know people like that. Getting away getting away from like the snow, right? Like those things, or being okay in a temperate
Yeah.
climate. It just, all of that matters as you make your decision. So it's good for you that you're exploring those options now.
RJ, I have a question for you. You have tremendous character. You really do. You just you exude it in everything that you do, and it's commendable. It really is, and it's important to have as a doctor, as a human, but also as a doctor. Just a little bit about coming from a Catholic school. You went to Notre Dame. There are very few Catholic affiliated universities in this country, and then only 4 med schools actually that are Jesuit. How did that education help mold your character even more so to go into such an ethical based career like medicine?
Yeah, I think there's a couple pieces to it. I think one, the core curriculum at Notre Dame, you take theology and philosophy, and you're encouraged to take more courses in that. I think what that does is kind of going back to the history and Latino studies piece, it kind of develops who you are outside of the medical studies and the science that you're doing. Because being a great physician is having that character, is being able to be at the bedside for somebody and tell them bad news in a way that is reassuring. And I think having that core curriculum at Notre Dame was very impactful. I think another reason I grew a lot at Notre Dame was the dorm life. As I mentioned, I got placed into a random dorm, but really had great role models. I mean, people who have been so foundational in my development, that I owe tremendous debt of gratitude to them, who have really shaped who I am. And kind of, I don't know if this is strange or not, but one thing I did before medical school was try to come up with brand equity for who I want to be as a physician. Kind of identify those people in my life who had traits that I admired, and how could I, utilize that in my life. And a lot of those people came from Notre Dame. A lot of my teachers, a lot of my friends, upperclassmen, who had that caring professional manner that I wanted to have one day, and that I'm still working on, developing every day.
That's tremendous. I don't think a lot of students often they think about this is the kind of doctor I want to be, but it's very rare that you hear someone say this is the type of doctor that I want to be in order to serve patients. So
Yeah.
that was a great
Yeah.
answer.
Well, before we let you go, I want to ask a question. Like Dina said, you're just exude professionalism. Like you're literally, I think, somebody that I would want to see as a physician, right? As a future physician. But
100%.
for those people that are one applying into medicine, thinking about medicine, are in medical school, what is the one piece of information or a takeaway that you would give to them in this, I would say, very complex, intricate journey? It's not easy. I love doing the work that I do and working with medical students and future medical students, but I wouldn't be able to do it just because it requires a lot, right? And again, it's not a passion. Right? I think you have to have a passion for what you do. But what is that one nugget of wisdom, something that they could take away that maybe you can share with them as they begin this journey, are in this journey, as they're finalizing their journey?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is find great role models. I cannot, like I kind of just mentioned, but I've had a lot of people in my life that I looked up to and have, taken interest in my development, and, have invested in me. And I'm very grateful for them. And I certainly would not be here talking to you, if I didn't have them in my life. So find physicians, find people in your community, family members, and explain your goals to them. I want to go to medical school. I want to go to, be a great doctor one day. Could I talk to you about that? Would you, support me in that journey? And I think, having people on your side is always a great option. You can never have too many people on your side when you're applying to medical school and going through that process. Another piece of advice is stay persistent. It can be a very difficult process, and I know there's a lot of factors at play, especially for people who are applying to medical school. If you apply now and you get in and it's your time to go, great. If it takes you a couple years, but you still have that strong burning desire, then absolutely, then it's absolutely worth it. And I would just say, as I mentioned earlier, it's like going to Mount Everest. There's a lot of different paths. You'll get to the top somehow. There's people here who have taken 5, 10 years off. People here like myself who went right through. So stay persistent, stay driven, and I think, never forget that medicine's a very valuable career, and it's a very fulfilling life.
Wow. Well, we'll
Thank you
end
so
there.
much.
Very
Yeah, it's so
inspirational.
inspirational.
It is,
I feel like
definitely.
I feel like I just went to church. I feel so motivated talking to you.
Yeah.
You have a gift. You really do. And I do think that's part of, a lot of that is part of the wonderful education that you have prior to medical
Yeah.
school. I think you're going to make an amazing doctor. I'm really proud of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. We wish you the best. Maybe we'll reach out to you in a couple of years and see where you're at. Hopefully, you are on your way to becoming that physician that you've always wanted to become. But thank you for taking the time again and for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you around. Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.